Hello and welcome to the Emmanuel Croydon podcast. At Emmanuel Croydon, we exist to be a community drawn together by our desire to know and follow Jesus. We long to become disciples of Jesus who are equipped to serve him in the whole of life, transforming families, communities and workplaces as we love God with heart, mind, soul and strength. We hope you enjoy this week's talk from the morning services. Thank you for joining us today. Grace and peace to you.
Hello, Emmanuel. This is a reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell the disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. I want to talk about resurrection. Today may not feel like a day of resurrection, but it is Easter the world over. Nobody has told that to the virus, but that doesn't stop it being true. And I hope in 10 minutes' time you'll be thinking of it in a new way. Crucifixion is public. That is one of the reasons it's so hideous. And it is deafeningly surrounded by noise. Crucifixion comes with screams. It comes with abuse and vicious mockery. It comes with earthquakes. It shivers into eclipse. It is nauseating in its rituals. And every terrible humiliation is public. Resurrection is not like that. Resurrection is not like that at all. Resurrection doesn't come with triumph or with shouts of praise or with exultant singing or surrounded by adoring crowds. Jesus Christ, the risen one whom we worship as God, rose from the dead in absolute silence, in the dark of the night, with no ceremony, in a cold tomb, and with no witnesses. For Jesus, death was public and noisy, but power and might and victory and new life came without warning and in silence. It was alone, alone, alone. He rose again behind the stone. By the time the women came with spices, by the time the earthquake agitated the garden, by the time the soldiers fell with fright, by the time the young man in white took his seat, they'd all missed it. Without an announcement of any kind, Jesus had got on with what God alone can do, and for which he needed no help. He had quietly risen from the dead. the event which has made a more profound impact on human destiny than all the world's revolutions put together, took place out of sight in a pre-dawn garden. But that is surely how it should be. For in life, in our own lives, the crucifixion events are loud and public and degrading and fearful. They're as bitter as winter. We are bereaved with an awfulness that wounds our spirits cruelly. Relationships break up with anguish and tears. Redundancies come harshly and in front of our colleagues. Violence breaks into our lives suddenly and with great dread. Pain tears our minds and muscles apart. But resurrection does not come like that. It comes silently, sometimes unnoticed. It comes unnoticed like shoots stirring in the bulbs which push new life up in the dark under the winter earth. When I am bereaved, resurrection begins when I look at a photograph of the person whose loss has been so wounding, and the sight of it unexpectedly brings a smile of joyful memory rather than a reopening of the wound. That is how God silently brings new life. When relationships break up, resurrection begins when I realise, unknown to anyone else, that for the first time recently, I'm enjoying something because I am me, not because I am part of a partnership. That is how God silently brings new life. When redundancy comes, resurrection begins when I discover that I have done something new or different which genuinely fills me with the measure of my own worth, rather than filling me with the satisfaction at what my job is worth. That is how God silently brings new life. The new life that follows violence might not even be noticed, because one day I revisit the scene or the circumstances and there is no fear. In fact, the memory of it doesn't occur to me. Sometimes resurrection is so quiet and private that it is an absence, not a presence. And when pain is intolerable, resurrection begins when I slip away from the body which has limited and disabled me, and all by myself step into the presence of God. That, of all ways, is how God silently brings new life. Oh, of course, when the coronavirus is behind us, there will be time and place for a noisy celebration of the resurrection and for the clamorous praise of the one who has brought it about. We'll be singing, we'll be triumphant. As Christians, we are an Easter people, and Alleluia is our song. But when our lives are not like that, when we feel the weight of life oppressively on our shoulders, that doesn't mean that the resurrection is beyond our experience. Those are the circumstances which most closely resemble the ground in which the resurrection first took place. And it may be in those circumstances that personal resurrection is already happening. Not with the stone being rolled away, that can come later amid great partying, but with life returning inside the shroud, inside the cave, inside the darkness of the night. Trembling and bewildered, the women fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone. Is that really a resurrection experience? Well, yes, actually. That was the resurrection experience of the first Sunday. Friday was a day which shook the world. Saturday was a day which shook the world. Sunday was so mixed with emotions that the world shook the day. Later on, its full triumph would be realised. Later on, its triumph would sustain courageous faith while the lions were roaring in the amphitheatre. Subservient faith when kings stepped to the throne for their coronation. Gorgeous faith when communion is consecrated in a glorious cathedral. Committed faith by a believer at his confirmation. Nervous faith by a student about to sit her exams. Exploratory faith by a young man leaving home for the first time. Thankful faith from someone who survived the coronavirus. Precarious faith from someone whose loved ones didn't. Desperate faith by a nation on whom bombs were dropping. Sustained faith by a couple enjoying their golden wedding anniversary. Hopeful faith by a church awaiting a new vicar. Partying faith by a band singing, "He has risen, Jesus is alive." That is how resurrection takes hold. But it is not how resurrection begins, this quietest of all revolutions. One day, the resurrection will be complete. We will take our place alongside Jesus in the presence of God. It will mean an eternity of justice restored, of peace made real, of healing made whole. The hints of new life which we have experienced on earth will be revealed as mere whispers compared with the fullness of what it actually means to be raised from the dead. We will tread the path which Jesus alone has trod. I have no idea what it will be like. I suppose I don't want to know. It is altogether possible that when it comes to our turn to come before God, it will be with fanfares and triumph and spectacle. That would, of course, be wonderful. But it would suit me down to the ground to be able to come finally into God's presence in an altogether different way, in the manner of Jesus' resurrection, without fuss, without noise, and with a certain knowledge that the revolution of holiness is made perfect once and for all, and whispering in astonishment, "Glory, glory, glory, glory."
Thanks for listening to the Emmanuel Croydon podcast. For more information about our church and everything we have going on, visit our website, emmanuelcroydon.org.uk. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram to see and hear what's going on in the life of our church. God bless you and have a wonderful week.